Welcome to the Fit Affiliate Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Kirkman, and sitting alongside me is Tony Ronke, the founder of Fit Affiliate and all-round CrossFit OG. The mission of Fit Affiliate is very simple: protect the affiliate model. Our sole purpose is to help affiliate owners and coaches attain freedom. We aren't here to tell you what to do, but to instead build your ability to believe in yourselves. Enjoy the show. And welcome back to the next episode of the Fit Affiliate Podcast. Back from his recent sojourn to the snow and the recent Canadian CrossFit Summit, Mr. Tony. How are you, sir?
Sojourn. Such a great word that I just don't think ever gets used in the United States. On a sojourn.
Yeah. Well, thought I'd add some class to the podcast today.
Yes, I mean, that's why you're here, is for that accent, because, it's great. I spent the whole week with that accent because everybody in BC, specifically everybody at Whistler, they're all either from Australia, New Zealand, and then there's a handful from the UK. And I was like, what the heck? Everybody here has the same accent. I'm like, I've spent the whole week with Lisa.
And as I said to you, the problem with that is what? But it's hot as over here, so everyone wants a white Christmas, so that's where they're going.
It's all of us, so you would never assume that anybody in Australia would ever do anything in the snow, because I don't think many people realize how many mountains are there, and especially in New Zealand, but Australia even has mountains too. And it's for all the rest of the world, I think we just assume Australia is just one giant desert island.
It is.
It's just always hot. We're it has a winter? What do you mean it's got a winter?
It is largely the desert island, but we have a couple of spots that get, cold and snowy, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, you have the oldest rainforest on the planet, actually.
We do. It's a little bit underwater at the moment, but
let me just tell you a fact, and everybody's on this conversation. Welcome to the podcast. And how many Australians that I had to inform that your beloved platypus is absolutely toxic, and they were like, "No, really?"
But
I said, "Yeah." Mm-hmm.
But it's not killed anybody.
Well, because there's not many of them. It's not like you're just swimming with a platypi. You're just.
Well, yeah, but even their venom's not gonna. It'll give you a sting, but it's not gonna kill you.
Well, it turns out most things that'll kill you are probably more afraid of you than you are of it. But at the same time, that little creature that should be the national animal of Australia, because it's quite literally the cutest creation on the planet, and is just hazardous. If nothing says Australia better than that animal, I don't know what it is.
This conversation is going to age very well. I'll just put a pin in that, but it's going to age very well. I'll just leave that for later. But
I'm so old that there used to. You might know these things, but back when I was a kid, there was no Google. They used to send out the National Geographic cards. Basically you get Encyclopedia Britannica was the closest thing to Google that you possibly had, and then they came to your door every year and they sold you the whole volume. And we never had one, so as a kid I stole it. Fun fact. Those things were expensive, but I remember they would send you those animal cards in that plastic bin, that plastic box. And my favorite animal was always the platypus, because I was like, how cool is this little beaver with a duck bill with feet? And and then it wasn't until much later I found out that, I had it all wrong.
Yeah, but they are cute. And did you know that a baby platypus is called a puggle?
No, I didn't actually know that, and that makes me feel like I'm not a platypi believer.
Welcome to the David Attenborough special.
More than one platypus is a platypi?
It could be. I don't know.
Where do they live in Australia?
In little rivers and little creeks all across the country.
You encounter one. Next thing you know, this little beaver duck just killed you.
I don't think that that's a possibility, but
duck-billed platypus. I'm curious. I don't know if I know the answer, but is there a different platypus that's not duck-billed?
No, that's it. That's one model. Only. That's it. Yep. There was, clearly some different creatures on the ark got up to some shenanigans, if that's your thing, and we just got this one.
I don't think that the ark was nature's breeding ground. I don't think that's how that worked. But
okay. Oh, spoiler alert.
That's a different arc that you're familiar with. I don't know what you've been watching. I don't want to.
All right, let's get on to today's topic. I think it's the end of the year. Everyone's a little cray cray, apparently, including us. But this
Everybody's on
is why,
vacation.
hey,
I feel like
everyone's
everybody's on
well,
vacation.
yeah, and I guess your little trip away is, the inspiration for today's episode. In that I know that you do at the end of year, you put a
A
huge
little
emphasis
reflection.
on reflection and thinking
The mirror.
about, yeah, that
No,
one.
not really the mirror. I don't go away and look in the mirror, but
Well, but thinking about what is, the year that's been, but then also using that as a lever to pull to set yourself up for success, looking ahead to the year that comes rather than just, sitting still, I guess, and stuck in that space. So I thought
yeah.
today was an interesting perspective because I know we're taking our clients through it. All the Fit Affiliate coaches have been through it, are going through it, and we do every year.
Uh,
Um,
well, yeah. I mean, everybody's. Here's the thing. Before you get into that whole constructive part that we're engaged in, I think everybody at the end of the year becomes laser focused, and the fact that like they have been alive for the last year, and ultimately we're coming up on what we call resolution season, I suppose. And so
mhm,
I think collectively the audience, knows that like, we're in goal setting season, perhaps.
mm,
And to that end, to your point about my sojourn to the mountains this year, I I've always kind of gone away and done the same thing in an attempt to basically look back on the last year. And it's obviously this is a fresh conversation because many of the clients are talking about this at the moment, and particularly how problematic it is. And so every year we push you guys to not only reset and establish the year that's coming based on the year that's been, but really I think the most important thing that is often overlooked is reflecting back on the year that has been. And so every year we suggest to you guys as clients, particularly from my own personal experience, which is pretty rare because like most of the company is not built on like things that I've done or things that I find to be successful so much as the things that we could possibly do that could improve your position, we being you as clients. And so um what is always interesting to me is that as this time of the year comes, I guess is a segue into this conversation, as this time of the year comes and we start working through the exercises and helping people start to think constructively about the year that's been, it's always fascinating to me. And I think this is where I got lucky with seminars. It's always fascinating to me how resistant everybody is at first. They're just like, I don't have time for that. Or like, whatever. It's been a good year. It's been a weird year. It's been a bad year. Like insert
mm,
whatever expletive in there that you can possibly think of. But um, it's always funny in that context because once they start, then they start working through it and they start to get a little bit more positive, a little bit more negative, a little bit more constructive, a little bit more all the above. And then from there, they're like, oh, wow, like this whole last year was way different than I thought it was going to be. And
mm,
so I guess as a personal anecdote, I got lucky with the idea of reflection in that naturally everybody thinks that's goals. And I thought I was bad at it. Truly. I was like,
mm,
in fact, I think for a long time I waged a war against goals. I don't know as though I have any of it written someplace, but I thought they were stupid. I just thought that like goals just don't work, right?
mm,
Because like honestly, most of the time they don't work. And there's an entire mechanism behind why they may in fact not work, but there's also a mechanism behind how you can make them work. And so for years, I would try to set the normal goals of a business owner, and I'm going to have a better year this year than I did last year. Going to add 10% or blah, 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 whatever that looks like. But what I was doing was essentially what keeps happening to the current clients, our affiliate owners. And I would try to like carve out some time, sit at my desk and in the gym or wherever and reflect and project into the future. And
mm,
I think I would do a good job of it considering the situation, but it was like whatever. And then what I'd end up with was a couple of pages of scribbles of things that probably were never going to get looked at again for the rest of the year. Right. And then what became the framework of the program that effectively is now started in like the first iteration started in like 2015. And that's when I was on seminars. So I was traveling. And so that's kind of when I started to get like control of the schedule more so than anything, where like I could book them more,
Mm.
or not so much as I could, but like I started booking them in places I wanted to go versus like places that were just like a good place for a seminar. And at the end of every year, I would always book into seminars and stay in between them. And um, and the reason I bring up this whole story is so we all know travel changes people. I think we've all heard that cliche, and I think that a lot of people think that it's mainly because like you get to experience new things and you get to see new stuff. But it really, the way that travel changes you is that it forces you to consider new things in relation to past patterns, right? So like
Mm.
you go to a country that doesn't speak your language and you're going to spend time there, like you can't engage in your subconscious routines, rituals, or habits.
Mm.
And so I thought maybe it would be a good thing. I noticed that when I was in those environments, that I was much more creative, but I was also much more introspective and much more self-aware.
Mm.
And in there, like I was like, it would probably be a good idea if like I start like using this time away in these places to get more creative and more reflective. And little by little, the the program started to become more about reflecting and looking back than it
Mm.
was at the end of the year looking forward. Because everybody at the end of the year is already setting their new resolutions looking forward. But I tried that, didn't work, right? So I didn't want to continue to do the same thing and expect different outcomes. So for me, I was like, maybe it seems a little bit more valuable when I start looking back, but it wasn't possible until I got outside of my environment, because you've heard us say it on here. You kind of have to change your environment to change the outcome. And like that's
Mm.
kind of how the whole thing started, and really kind of how the program started to get into its first several iterations, in that getting out of your environment to intentionally influence or change your outcome is such a massively overlooked tool that's available
Mm.
to every single person, even if it's just a vacation, even if you're not going to go and engage in some degree of structured reflection or otherwise. Like I don't know anybody who doesn't go away and realize that like, wow, this day, and I just had this conversation, like this day, in Paris on this cobblestone
Mm.
street, going to this cafe and doing this thing feels a lot better than at home when I just get up on autopilot and go to work, go do this, and then I blink and
Mm.
it's Saturday. Right. And so what do you do when you're on vacation? Like, oh, I'm going home and I'm gonna bring this thing with me. Like it's
Mm.
personal. Every time I go away, I come back a pescatarian. Every single time. Doesn't matter where I go, but particularly usually ends up happening when I go to like the islands like Hawaii, because you just
Mm.
always eat fish when you're there. But like I come back and like that's a perfect example, right? I'm like, I had so much fun. I felt so good eating fish. Like, just for the record, for everybody listening, I would definitely be a pescatarian if it was more convenient. Like, but
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm an omnivore. Um, but I would come back and I would start eating fish, and I'd eat it for like a month until eventually, like, habits, routines, and rituals
Mm.
take over, and you start slipping back into whatever's convenient to eat. And like that's the point that we've all experienced, right? I guess is that and nobody has ever gone away and been like, hey, I like this routine. Like you probably got up at your leisure, no alarm clock,
Mm.
hung out a little bit in the hotel room. Then you probably walked down to the gym, did a little bit of exercise, grab coffee, maybe some breakfast at the hotel, you know, came back, and then you probably read and you were constructive. And then after that, you probably went about your day, whatever you had planned for the day, to hike or
Mm.
swimming or surfing or sitting. It doesn't really matter, whatever's your thing. And then you make it to dinner, and then you repeat. And then
Mm.
you come at the end of vacation, and this is me rambling, I feel like, at this point, but too bad we're all on this journey with me. You come to the end of your vacation and you're like, man, what a week that was, right? And back to
Mm.
the real world. But there's actually, especially if you're a business owner, there is systematically and mechanically no reason that you couldn't replicate and shouldn't replicate that exact same thing. Now,
Mm.
naturally, there obviously no work had taken place there, but I would bet if you're a business owner, you probably brought a book with you, or you thought about your business, or you probably even just when you had some downtime, you were able to think creatively and constructively about your business, right? You're able to start thinking like outside of like the fires that are in the email and the
Mm,
problems, and all the phone calls that you know are happening at the gym, but you finally left the phone there and you didn't bring it with
mm,
you. You were able to start thinking about it. And you're like, man, if I could do anything at the gym, I would do it this way or this way. Like, so my point is, you
mm,
were still working, but you were actually probably for the first time working on the things that you should be working on versus working on the things that are asking for your attention, which is what you do when you're at home. Right. And so I don't know any
distraction.
business owner is, yeah, right. I don't know any business owner who's ever gone away from their business, ever spent time away from it and hasn't thought about it. That would be
Mm,
impossible. Right.
it's
I
not,
mean,
yeah.
you could probably try to lobotomize yourself to some degree, but it's not
You
likely
can
going to work.
you can have all good intentions, but you are still, because it's your thing, it's your creation, it's your baby, it's going to, you know, be in your brain.
Right.
And I think that, you know, even well, to people who are listening to this or watching this who are sitting there going, "Oh, that'd be nice to be able to duck off to Paris for a week." You can actually microdose yourself this, which is, what I've kind of done is find an hour
Microdose
or 2 hours where you
with some
can
mushroom. Oh,
no, no, no,
different microdose.
different
That's a
microdoses.
different episode for a different time.
Um, taking myself off site to work and write. So I
Mm,
go to a cafe or like I do my best writing when I'm sitting just in a cafe having a coffee. And even if I create that time intentionally, and I know that we've done this exercise with clients, it's like go and work somewhere else for an hour or two each week. And it's just they're like, "Wow, it was amazing. I was much more creative." So it's not you don't necessarily, if you don't have the capacity, take yourself to some foreign location for a week. If you do, that's fantastic. But you can also do this in, you know, smaller ways to start to build that habit and get that creative brain and understand what that feels like and know that you could then tap into that consciously when you need to.
yeah. I think in a lot of ways it's actually probably more effective when you do microdose it without the mushrooms. When you
Mm,
do microdose it and you do just take a, call it a staycation, or you
mm,
just take a little bit of a change of environment. Because listen, the whole reason that I'm able to do this every single year is because I have tons of points and miles that come from, working on the road
mm,
all year. So let's be honest, like I had an advantage, right? And that advantage usually resulted in me wanting to dump points and miles at the end of every year before they got devalued. And like that's how I learned it. But I know that most people don't, although you should definitely have a points credit card and shift your spending to that. It'd just be a responsible human and pay your credit card off every month. But that's a completely different episode, I suppose, too. That and microdosing, we're just listing them all out in advance here. Uh, because really, honestly, you guys spend so much money a year mandatorily. Like, why wouldn't you just put it on a card that you end up getting points and miles so that you have no choice but to use those points and miles? Because, like, here's the thing: you're never going to take vacations, like, because they're
mm,
expensive. Right? They cost a bunch of money. But when you have a whole bunch of points and miles, and they're only really good for vacation, like
mm,
you will be much more likely to use them. And the easiest way to do that is to take all the bills that you're already spending through your probably your debit card or your business card and just put them on your, whatever insert whatever travel or points card here and then
mm,
do that. But that's a whole different pro tip right there for you guys is to just shift it there because it's just free money, honestly. And it's an
mm,
easy way if you heard the episode about us talking about how to pay yourself, like the easiest way to pay yourself is to not give yourself a choice. And so if
mm,
you're already going to be buying the toilet paper, the cleaning supplies, what
mm,
all these things, just put them on a card that gives you a reward that you wouldn't likely buy yourself.
mm,
And like don't get a travel credit card if you're willingly going to always be booking your own flights and going. Like it's probably not that
mm,
valuable for you. But like get one if you're not good at like taking yourself out to dinner and stuff like that. Get a card that does that. But anyways, my point is that it's probably better for you to just live in the microdose environment because that's so immediately available to you, right?
mm.
It's very easy to get in your car and drive up to the mountains for the day if they're
Yeah.
close to you, or to the beach if it's close to you, or to the lake, or to the trail network, or just to the coffee shop, right?
Mm,
Changing your consciously changing your habit forces your subconscious to get disarmed. And so you have to understand how the brain or the mind really works. And like we've talked about this before, but the subconscious and the conscious do not work well together. In fact, by design, they don't work together at all. Truly. Subconscious does, in fact, affect the conscious mind, but the conscious mind is completely unaware that there's this other supercomputer in the driver's seat. It just thinks that like this is a self-driving car. Like this is awesome. We just get to places, and then I think about it when I get there. And the reason why that is funny, but why it matters, is that the supercomputer that is the brain is your subconscious. That's the one that's driving every single day. And so when it comes time to do reflection, goal setting, anything constructive inside your current environment, it's almost impossible for you to do it effectively because the subconscious does not want, this is my artwork, I just twisted this up. Your subconscious does not want your conscious mind poking holes in it, right? It doesn't want your conscious mind to think and be like, why do we do that thing? And this is why getting into like, a trip or something like that we've all done is so important, because it's not until you go away and you completely disarm the subconscious and the conscious mind has to take over for the whole week. And this is why when you're on vacation, you have way more fun, because you can consciously choose to do whatever you feel like doing and want to do. And you disarm all the habits, routines, and rituals. It's also why sometimes, despite the middle of an amazing vacation, you have this perilous feeling of boredom. Like you're just like, and then boredom feels like a different wave of boredom than you ever felt bored in your life when you're like gone away and you're like, what are we going to do the rest of the day? Like, it's just, like, it's 9:30 in the morning. You've been up because of jet lag since 4:30. You've already worked out. You've already been in the gym and you've already walked down to the beach, and it's fucking 9:30. You're like, what the hell am I going to do? And then that feeling, that just panic ridden boredom that you have of like, oh, I have the rest of the day to like do whatever. That's your subconscious panicking because it can't do any of the things that it normally would do on autopilot. Because what happens when you're at home? I wake up probably the same time. I blink and it's 5 p.m.
Yep.
And then you look back and you're like, what'd you do this week? I actually have no idea. Right. Like, and so, we're largely talking about the value of travel at this point, but it's really about changing the environment, because when you tell somebody to sit down and project and reflect and do all these things in their own current environment, it's really, really hard to do because the subconscious is in the driver's seat. You're going to likely go to the same coffee shop or make the same drive to the same similar coffee shop. Like when it comes time to think about your future and think about your past, try to find a way to change everything about the day, if nothing else, at a microdose level. So like, don't go to your favorite coffee shop, go to a new one, go to one in a completely different town nearby, go outdoors where like, it's never the same moment, find a place where you can intentionally disarm your habit machine, your subconscious, so that your conscious mind can take over. Because in that moment of perilous boredom at 9:30 in the morning on vacation, what happens? You're forced to think about what you're going to do the rest of the day. And then you get to choose what you want to do the rest of the day, and you get to pick what you're going to do the rest of the day. And what happens? You had a great day, right? Come the end of the day, you're like, man, that panic that happened at 9:30 in the morning, that proved to be nothing because I was busy as shit all day. That was amazing. We surfed for 4 hours. We did this. Like, and you never just sit there unless you settle into the panic of your subconscious and you just sit by that pool and you just stare at the pool like, this is terrible. I just want to go home. And that is a truth. That is a reality that happens to a lot of people. Maybe some of you guys that are listening, you're like, I've tried vacation. It sucks. As soon as I get on the plane, as soon as I get someplace, all I want to do is be home. Hello, subconscious. Like, that's all it is.
And letting it go. And I think, the important part of this process that we're going through, or you've been through, is not just, we talk about this being resolutions season and everyone's talking about, well, I'm going to make 2024 better than 2023 and I'm going to, do all these things differently. But also taking the time to stop and think critically about where you've been, and honestly, and not just, the shit that went wrong or wasn't ideal or where you screwed up, but also taking the step to go, what did I do really well? And again, we kind of do this on a microdose week by week with clients when they're checking with their coaches, where we have this little reflection piece. But when we look at it for the year, and I think this is what helps it have a little bit more power than the traditional resolution season of I'm going to do this, 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 and this is like taking the time to acknowledge your wins and the positives, and also while at the same time looking at things that weren't as great for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
that can really give you some solid data to, rather than just going, oh, well, everything in 2023 was, crap, I'm going to burn it to the ground and 2024 will be better. Well, that's a lot. What specifically needs to be better? But what do you also want to bring forward? Because there are some things that you did that were great. But if we don't stop and reflect on that and like you said, switch off our subconscious and give ourselves permission to dig into that and look honestly at that, then we can kind of just run blindly into the fire, as do 99% of the population with our New Year's resolutions. And then after January 2nd, it's like, don't think about it again until January, December next year. It's like, oh, that thing I was going to do in 2020 and I was going to get back to in 2021 and I really prioritized it in 2022 and I was going to do it in 23. I'm just going to put that in for 2024 now. That's the loop you get into.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like it's easy to think about where you want to get to, but it's hard to consider why you're at where you're at, right? And I think for whatever reason, I stumbled into it years ago, but there was definitely something missing in terms of my projection, in that, like, why was I setting the goals that I was setting, or why was I setting this future version of the future that I was setting? And this might sound a bit whimsical or esoteric, even, in that reality is not real. I just lost
Run away and get those mushrooms, everyone. Buckle up.
Reality is nothing more than perception. No two people process the exact same moment the same, right? We'll call it Sonder, right? And the reason for that is that perception is based on your brain, right? It's based on your computers working together. But really what it means is that the moments you're facing, the environment, the stimulus, et cetera, that you're facing is infinitely passed through past experiences, exposures, traumas, lessons, insert XYZ. And then because of that, that's how you accept whatever it is as truth, right? And so I say this because we think as people, we tend to think that, like, what we think is fact, right? Or truth rather. But it's not, right? Like, green is not the same green to any two people. I mean, it's whatever. Math is probably one of those truths, because 1 + 1 is 2, despite what some people on the internet now are trying to say. But but the point is that the only reason we know 1 + 1 is 2, though, is because at some point in the past we learned that is in fact how that works, right? And that is important, because whatever has happened to you, whatever you've experienced, encountered, or lived through, positive or negative, will affect how you perceive any single moment. It will also affect how you project any future moment, right? And what ends up happening more than often than not with our clients is that when they come in, they have a real hard time creating, projecting, or imagining a positive future, because, well, they probably haven't had much of a positive past. And
it's the trauma of everything that they've currently been through, right, and that it just comes with them, and that's their filter.
Yeah, and so when you'd ask them, to come up with an ideal income, they're like, well, I mean, I would like anything, right? I'm like, that's not a goal. It's not ecological. It's not going to pursue something that is going to be an improvement of our life. And as this applies to the conversation about, travel and changing your environment, that's an easy place to start to think about, like, hey, what at home do I just take for granted? What do I just accept at face value and I don't necessarily question? And then this starts to extend itself out like fingers and tendrils into the idea of, like, hey, what goals am I setting for the future? Because they're safer, right? Or they are some degree of an extension of what I consider to be normal right now. Because the difference between you and, let's just call it, somebody who's a billionaire at this point, it's funny to me how we don't talk about millionaires anymore. People talk about billionaires now. Isn't that interesting? As a society, I think that it's fascinating. I stumbled onto this the other day. And I was like, as a kid growing up, we talked about millionaires.
Want to be a millionaire?
Obviously, there's a lot more millionaires now than there ever was. There's a lot more billionaires, but there's like, as a kid growing up, I don't think I even knew a single billionaire. Like nobody, like you just knew that they were rich. But now it's like, and so like people seem to reference billionaire is like the new millionaire in terms of like reference point of rich, which is a big difference. But anyways,
normalized.
Complete digression there. I'm on several tangents this morning, but my point is that the difference between you and a billionaire in terms of the goals they set are purely based on their reality, right? And their reality is based on their perception. And so if you would like to massively change your trajectory, you have to get yourself into a position or a place or an element where you are changing your perception, you're changing your reality. And the easiest way to do that as a human is to just physically get up and move to someplace else, not like move your house, but like go to someplace else for the day. And to then spend that time reflecting and being creative, because you just said it a bit ago. The most important part of looking forward is looking back. And, as a personal example, this has been an interesting year for me. Probably truly is actually the hardest year of my entire life. And so come the end of the year, it would be very easy for me without any reflection to set some degree of goals moving forward, to be like anything besides last year, right? Like that would truly feel like a win to me at that point. And that would probably just be acceptable. And if I wasn't forced, committed, and engaged into the habit of going away, and then the expenditure of already paying for going away, and then being forced to in fact go away and do it, trust me, up until the day and the moment I got on that airplane, I tried to get out of it, right? I tried to cancel it. And as Lisa knows, I did actually cancel one version of it and flip-flopped it and moved it back a week. And to the value of the people I have in my life, everybody who's close to me was like, why did you do that? Because everybody knew that like I was trying to move the goalpost. And I'm, I say this because we are the anti-guru, and I'm not better than anybody that's listening to this. I'm not smarter. I don't have more experience. I just am maybe a little bit more aware, because I tend to look at myself a lot more often than most people do. But I am just like you. If somebody said to me this last year, okay, it's time to set goals for next year, and I wasn't committed to the process, and I didn't understand the immense value that this process has had on my life over the last 5 years or longer, I don't think I would have gone. I would have canceled. I would have gotten out of it, or I would have been like, I'll just go do it at the dining room table. It's different. I'll go sit down there and do it, or I'll go to the coffee shop. And it might have worked, but I was committed to the process, and it did happen. And what ended up happening is that by getting away and going and playing, like, I looked back on the worst year of my entire life, for many reasons, that it was the worst year. But then I started to have to positively reflect on that year. And then I realized that all of those bad things that happened to me were actually some of the moments that I was the most proud of, because of the person that showed up in those moments. Those were my big wins, and for lots of them. And I say this to everybody that's listening is because if I wouldn't have gone away and I wouldn't have been forced into this habit that I've been in, I wouldn't have looked back and been like, the saddest moment of the year. One of the biggest wins was being the person for my family that they needed me to be, and I was able to be because of the life that I've created. I was able to spend every day at my mother's house while she worked through an immense amount of grief that nobody else in my family could, because they didn't live here, they worked, or they had other obligations. And it's no mark against them. It's just that the value of freedom shows itself in very interesting ways. And like, listen, I didn't want to demonstrate my freedom by being able to be there for my mother for months. So if you look back at some of these episodes, you'll definitely see that I was sitting in the dining room for a lot of these episodes. But I'm grateful for the life that I've created and my ability to do so, even though in those moments I was like, freedom would have looked a lot cooler if it was like the red Ferrari out there or
Yeah.
something. But those were my highlights. And if had I not been engaged in this process for so long, I wouldn't have looked back on those moments. I wouldn't have looked back on, the moments when I was in the middle of the Grand Canyon, or in those moments when I was, at the dining room table by myself in a very sad environment, but being able to remain positive for all of my clients. And, for me, it's an important thing. And I share that all with you guys because it is at a micro level what you guys all experience every single day. Like, years are hard, days are hard, weeks are hard. Business ownership, not just affiliate ownership, is incredibly difficult. And if you don't look back with some degree of constructive, reflection, it's easy to not think about it. And like, for all the clients, for all of you guys who have gone through it, and I force you to do it, you're always like, whatever, I don't want to do it. And then they're like, holy shit, this has been a way better year than I thought it was. I'm like, yeah, and so let's build off of that, right? So when it comes time to build new things moving forward, had I not really dug into how much I had won in the last year, I probably wouldn't dig into what I was going to go after in the next year, because I would have just set a goal of like, I'm just thinking the next year we go for little to no waves. We just calm sea. That's all I want. But, you look back and you're like, holy shit, the reason that person was able to show up in those moments, and it's not just about sorrow, but like middle of the Grand Canyon, et cetera. Like, that person was made possible through pushing that bar. And I'm only able to push that bar based on who I once was and being hell-bent on becoming who I want to be. And as it comes time for you guys to consider your business goals, don't consider the business goals, I guess, is the first thing that I would say to you. As you start to reflect back, what you're going to find is that as you think back on the year, you'll probably think of some wins in the company, some wins in the business. But I bet you, as you think back, you'll think about how those wins made you feel as a person, and how those wins affected your family, or your family's perception of you as a business owner. And then you start to understand that even when you do win in business, the only way a win in business is a win is because it does something in your personal life. And as you start to set goals, and as you start to reflect back, and you start to think about all the times where all the areas where your life got better through the business and through the things that you've done, as you start to set goals moving forward, consider that, because you have to set goals for you, for your life, because the business backfills those. But if you set goals for the business, or for, whatever external sort of thing you're pursuing, I can tell you with certainty, and through experience, that you'll accomplish a lot of things and not necessarily find yourself much happier at all. And so you got to figure that part out.
And I think, if you're setting goals just for what the business wants, like, the business will take and take and take and take and take and take. We know that, and you will be chained to it. We put out a post yesterday about, what you own or, possess will own you at some point. And it's a powerful thing to almost separate yourself, and and I think that's where a lot of affiliate owners particularly get stuck, particularly when it comes to looking at the distractions around CrossFit and those other things. Is like, and I fell into the trap. My identity was that business. That's who I was. But when we can step back and separate that, it becomes a lot easier to go, okay, how did I grow this year? What were my wins this year? What freedoms did I actually achieve this year? And rather than, setting the standard or the measure of my year by some arbitrary set of metrics that somebody said, this is how you determine if you're successful or not. By looking at my story of the year, I could actually go, well, yeah, I was successful, not by somebody's arbitrary, profit and loss metrics, but by growth and freedom and the things that really matter. Could I do the things that were important to me and important to those I love? Those, well, yeah, I have been successful. Well, how do I get the business now to support more of that, rather than me support what the business needs?
It's, man, That's a whole ass episode right there. I feel like if we dug into that one, and maybe that one should actually become a longer one, because this has been a recurring conversation completely aside from the whole goal setting
Mm,
and thing, has been with a lot of the field leaders I've talked to recently. It's like
mm,
the collective, what's the right word? I wouldn't want to say the collective negativity or sadness or discomfort of affiliate owners.
mm,
It's that there's a collective lack of quality of life, vitality of affiliate owners, and
mm,
what I think interests all the field leaders that we do talk to is that we're the only ones focusing on that part,
mm,
right? Is specifically the how your work creates your life, not how your life creates your work.
mm,
And um, that is completely separate, I suppose, from the whole goal setting conversation, but it is something that is so worth talking about because it does matter when it comes time to set these goals. Is that like
mm,
if you don't get out of the environment and you don't consider how great a day was that was absent of your actual day to day, you
mm,
can't really possibly fathom how bad your day to day is, right? It's a lot like fitness. Like if you until you've experienced somebody doing a 3 minute Fran, do you think your 8 minute Fran is fantastic, or at least it's normal? And then you realize,
mm,
oh my gosh, like it's not. And in a lot of ways, a vacation is a lot like experiencing a 3 minute Fran because it breaks your whole paradigm. It changes
mm,
everything about what you experience, but it also shows you what's possible. And
mm,
if your if your effort and your outcomes are not in the pursuit of things like, cobblestone streets and coffee shops or whatever your version of that looks like,
mm,
what is it all for? Because we
mm,
get caught up as humans in working for the sake of work
mm,
instead of working for the sake of output, right? We have to be creating a future. And so with the clients, the coaches essentially work you guys through this process, right? It's
mm,
every single week for one, but then at the end of the year, it becomes incredibly more important because we're all collectively aware or focused on the year that's been and the year that will be.
mm,
And it's a great time, regardless of whether or not you have a coaching relationship with anybody, to think about really how you actually won. Like when were you the most you in the last 12 months and what did that feel like, right?
mm,
And then consider some questions like who do you ultimately want to become as a person? And I didn't really want to go into the details of a lot of this stuff because it's such a hard conversation to have
mm,
with a bland audience, a blank audience, because like you say things like, "Who do you want to become?"
mm.
That's a lot like everybody's like least favorite question. Like the most fearful question is like to meet a new girlfriend's father and be like, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" You're like, "Dude, I don't even know where I see myself tomorrow." Right?
Yeah.
And so when you ask somebody a question like, "Who do you want to become?" That's an interesting thing to have to process, and you're gonna have a hard time doing that in your own environment. You're gonna have
Mm,
to definitely get out of there and be like, "Do I kind of like the version of me that's away from home more than I like the version of me that is at home?"
mm.
Um,
But I think that's the beauty, and it highlights the beauty of, what we always talk about, the difference between, being coached or being taught versus, or not all, but being versus being talked at. And, you know, because each of our clients have an individual journey, like, we don't just work on here are some mimetic goals, here are the standard, and by week 4 you should have ticked this box. It's like, who is the person you want to become,
mm,
and how can your business or how does your business support that, or how do we get it supporting that, and really having those powerful conversations rather than what was your growth percentage and what was your churn, and by week 3 you should be this and week 4 you should be that. And you know it's a very individualized journey, and
mm,
it's the coaching that, by asking more of those questions, we can really dig into those things, and because we appreciate the importance of that rather than, just the numbers and the stats. It's the story, if you like, the story of your year and who you became. And, well, cool, who do you want to be now next year, and how do we have this other vehicle, this business, to support that for you
mhm,
and stop you being, chained to it. But it's individual and unique. It's not, well, here's the formula for everybody and here's your journey. Like, we talk about the difference between ecological goals and mimetic goals. And, we're not just setting that thing because, well, here's what everyone else is doing. Well, no, well, what do you want to do? What makes you better? What helps you achieve freedom?
One thing that I'm particularly proud of as a company that we were able to do, and we still do, is, because we have every meeting that's ever happened with every single client. Like, as a coach, I can look back and be like, well, Lisa, despite this version of you that showed up to this call telling me about the sky falling, I can tell you that on April 15th in that meeting, you told me about how you did X, Y, or Z, closed on your house, or you did this and whatnot. And so I'm not entirely sure the narrative fits the context here. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Because what I'm proud of that is that we have the ability to do that, because for everybody else, it's at best they could probably be like, back on April 15th, when you finished module 5, you really crushed that one. Right?
Yeah.
Because the difference between being in a coaching relationship versus a training relationship in your business, but in life in general, is that, like, in a training program, all I can really ever know is how you interacted with that training program, which is probably fine if, like, that's the intended outcome. But in a coaching relationship, I can know really how that interaction affected your life and affected your business. And for us, because we don't have a training program, right, I can always look back on every one of the clients and be like, well, despite how you feel, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And they're like, oh, shoot,
And
that sucks.
it is like, I've had those profound moments when clients have to be sat back on their, on their heels, where they go, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, when you remind them how much they have grown as a human, become a better leader, become a better, husband, wife, parent, a better human, because of the life journey that they've been through, then they're like, oh yeah. And, one of the most powerful things that we do at the start of all of our calls is, what's your good news? And people, when you're so stuck in the weeds and the fire, and you're putting out fires, and then suddenly they'll start talking through conversation, and you're like, well, okay, you've just given me 5 things that made good news, and you said that you didn't have any because the world was on fire, but you just listed, your kid got an award at school and you had to go to this presentation thing. And it's like, oh, because we're listening and asking questions, not just going, what was your churn rate this week? And I think that's where the power of being able to sit back and have those conversations and let that story unfold, rather than, well, it's week 6, we've got to talk about this. I don't care what's going on. Oh, your kid did something cool. Great. Let's move on. We got stuff to do. It's it's a very powerful dynamic and shift, and it requires, the ability to be open to that.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons why perception and reality, is an important conversation, is that information is abundantly available. It's everywhere, right? We can Google anything. And a pretty visceral example of this is, I've had the opportunity to sit in many of these summits now with rooms full of affiliate owners, and I get to watch their perception, meaning I get to watch how they interact with information that is basically disseminated to them, whatever that might be. There'd be something from HQ, or, something about whatever. And I never really watched the presenter so much as I watched the room, and to see, and so you have 50, 100, 200 affiliate owners. And for really no rhyme or reason, some of them are feverishly taking notes over what just happened. And some people are sending a text message or scrolling social media, or some people are just talking to each other. And then the next conversation comes up, and those people switch. Now, those people who were texting, they're now taking notes, and other people are texting. And so what's important about this is that they're receiving the same information. They're receiving the exact same conversation in the exact same environment from the exact same people, in regards to the exact same intended outcome, right? Your affiliate, your CrossFit affiliate. Nobody at that table, those chairs, those line of chairs, is receiving the same information, because they're receiving it through their own past, their own history, their own perception. So, you see this on a day-to-day basis when you read a book and it changed your life, and I've said this before, and you give that book to somebody and you're like, how great was that book? They're like, that's good. You're like, no, this is great. I changed my life. They're like, I mean, yeah. I'm like, you should read it again then. Like, and you want to just keep reading the book because, like, yeah, if you read it again, you'll get it. But like, it won't because
Mm.
that book isn't relative to them. Like, and one of the reasons why I was said before, like, you should quit books because sometimes great books aren't great books to you because you don't have the
Mm.
past, you don't have the keystone rather for that book to fit into. And this is why information becomes such a problem as it applies to businesses that not only do we all receive the same information, but now I start to feel some type of way because you guys thought that what you just heard was amazing. And I was just like, meh. And so now
Mm.
I think there's something wrong with me. So now I'm feverishly trying to figure out what's wrong with me instead of that. And so all this stuff comes to a head as it applies to none of it matters except for what matters. And what matters is that the purpose of business, all business, is to improve the quality of life of the owner. And so when
Mm.
you're listening to information, something that might have excited you must have tapped or touched or triggered. That's going to make my life better. It's going to make my life
Mm.
easier. And then something else that someone else thought was going to do the same for them didn't do that for you. And that's okay.
Mm.
Right. Like it's all information is effectively worthless. We can Google anything that we want. What
Mm.
matters is implementation of information. Like
Mm.
at a level that matters to all of you guys listening to this, CrossFit isn't worth anything.
Mm.
Programming is not worth anything. Training, unfortunately, is not worth much.
Mm.
However, the implementation and the application of CrossFit is completely and totally worth a fortune, right?
Mm.
It has, there's not even a price point that matters on that,
Mm.
right? Because what that is what you guys provide. You, as CrossFit practitioners, providers, or otherwise, you are helping people apply and implement CrossFit into their life. And that does not just mean do CrossFit. That means
Mm.
the intention of what they're doing by doing CrossFit, right? So like if my client is going to do CrossFit 5 days a week, what is the point of that?
Mm.
What are they applying that to? What are they implementing that into? Why does that matter in their life? And you should know those answers because that's coaching. But if you think that just doing CrossFit is doing CrossFit and that's what matters, that's just training. And it will still help people, no
Mm.
doubt about it, because it's just the way that it works. But that's the difference. And so for like with us, like it doesn't really matter what you want to work on. Right?
Mm.
Really for us, it's a matter of what is going to be the outcome. Right.
Mm.
And like that becomes the conversation back to this that we're so proud of is that we don't have to get caught up in getting you to like the reading, like the book, like the information that we gave you, and then support that and then defend it and continue to refute it. Instead, we get to listen to what you would like to get done, and then we brainstorm ideas together, and then we let you go run with it, and then we evaluate, did that have the intended effect? If yes,
Mm.
continue. If not, remove. Like it's simply that. But as it applies to setting your goals, that becomes incredibly important too. Because
Mm.
if you're not going to set a goal with the direct intention of improving your life down to a granular level, you're not going to succeed.
And I think, part of the power of that, having that unique journey is that we're able to then get into those once we've set those goals is and getting clients, they're running off taking that action is then when we review what worked, what didn't, is like, why was this a problem for you? Why did you stop doing the thing? And that allows the more powerful conversations around rather than, well, I don't know why it didn't work for you. It's worked for everybody else. Like, what's the here's the template, here's the formula, it's worked for everybody else. Why does it not work for you? Like you're doing something wrong rather than, okay, what was the struggle for you here? Like, this is the idea that you came up with. This is what you want to own. And again, we get into more of those more powerful behavioral conversations and then get into beliefs and those structures, which is where the real power of change and the impact can be, which makes the goals something real and tangible rather than just an arbitrary number I'm filling out because someone told me I had to because it's coming up to the end of the year.
Yeah. As an anecdotal piece of support to that, in one of the summits that I had the ability to sit in, the audience received a great piece of advice, a phenomenal piece of advice, particularly as it applies to answer your phone within 3 rings every time it rings. because the bigger part of that conversation was the framework to getting to a truly insurmountable and unfathomable amount of money that your business could create to a room full of affiliate owners who I think are identifiably and agreeably not in possession of enough money, right? So like they're clearly all have a need to hear this information, and they are feverishly consuming this information at this point. Like most of them are taking notes at this point. And one of the key things in there is, got to answer your phone within 3 rings. And I basically had made a bet that I was like, I will bet you that not even a week from this date, I will call a large number of these people in the room, and less than 10% will answer the phone. So I called 20 of them. 2 of them answered the phone at all, let alone within 3 rings. And none of them, despite being disguised as a prospect, have to this point, weeks later,
responded,
called me back or even emailed back. And my
but
point,
they
I
need
guess,
more leads.
up is that the information is relative, the pain point is relative, everything is relative, but until you pass it through your situation, will you ever get to the implementation? And that's what has to change. And that's why the trouble with business advice and best practices and these things is that they don't consider the receiver of said advice. Because they can't. It's hard to sell a system if you got to worry about how everybody that's going to consume that system is going to interact with it.
Yeah. And then it becomes about, it's not the system is the problem. Well, you're the problem, so you need to fix you. But rather, like, let's figure out what you need. And it's not it's not about putting a templated system down. It's what supports you getting to where you want to be. Great. Let's build ideas around that. And there are, there's a place for systems and processes and repeating successful actions. But to start the journey, it's really about having those conversations about, the individual and where they want to be and what's their magic wand, but also being able to identify, you know what, I became this kind of person this year and I really want to take that forward, rather than, to go back to your story about the phones, is like, yeah, I've heard this great thing, I'm going to do it. And I did it for a week and now I'm not doing it anymore. Like these are the
I
things
didn't even
that
do it 3 days later.
Yeah. These are the things that mean enough to me that I want to bring forward. Like, in your personal year this year, there's a lot about the man that you were that you want to bring forward and continue to do more of this year, now that you have that awareness that you can do that and we're able to do that. It's like, I want to bring that version of me forward. Okay, how do we support that happening? And it doesn't always have to be around, things that are awful and hard, but how do I, replicate that ability to show up and turn up and be that kind of person this year? That's what I want to take forward. Okay, let's build the foundation on that. And that's the power of coaching, not just telling who you should be and what you should be focused on.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the power of us. I think,
Yeah.
if apples to apples here. I mean, everybody will kind of usually asks us like, what do you do or how are you different? But like, that's really what it comes down to. At the end of the day, the company that we build, the company that I'm proud of, is the company that builds better people. And those better people build better businesses. I could easily have, built this company to build better businesses or, created systems to help people build better businesses and been absolutely fine with being like, worked for XYZ, it'll work for you. But it didn't necessarily mean that they were going to become better people. And don't take this as I don't want you guys to make a bunch of money and become better business owners. I just know that by making you a better version of you, by making you a better man, a better woman, by making you a better anything you touch gets better. But by making the things that you touch better, I can't guarantee that's going to have the same impact on you. And so for us, the thing that I'm the most proud of is that we very, very effectively get people to understand what that looks like, who they want to become, and then are ruthless about getting you to that point. And for a lot of people listening to this, I know that seems absolutely repulsive to you, truly. And you should not click apply here, because I'm going to ask you who you want to become, and I'm going to drill down on that, and I'm going to make you defend it, and I'm going to make you identify it. and it'll make you protect it. But if that doesn't seem interesting to you because all you want to do is use your business as a distraction, we're not for you.
Yep. And that's the very much the power of the conversation and helping us, understand when, people are ready for this at different points in their journey. And when
some journeys don't ever have this in it, and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong. All right. I think that this has been a good chat.
Well, I'm always right. Just so we're clear, I'm never wrong. I'm just kidding, guys. Everybody, I'm kidding.
He's
That
not.
would make me a guru.
He's not. We'll release my call recordings. He's always right. I'll stand here and say Tony is right.
It applies to you. I am almost always right.
And on that note, we've got some good guests coming down the pipeline. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite platform. Give this a share, give this a like, give us a review. We appreciate it. If you have any questions, please reach out. Follow us on Instagram at FitFillate. We're always there and always happy to chat. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, Tony.
Peace out, homies.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please remember to like and subscribe on your favorite platform. And if you know an affiliate owner, a coach, or entrepreneur that would benefit from hearing our conversations, please share this with them. We love the feedback and support we have from you guys, our audience. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find all the useful links in the show notes. We would love to connect with you. Keep doing the great work.